There are moments when cruelty wears a white dress and a perfect smile. Moments when hate disguises itself as celebration, when a wedding becomes a stage for public execution, when joy is weaponized against the vulnerable. On a Saturday afternoon in June, beneath chandeliers dripping with crystals and flowers arranged to perfection, a pregnant woman stood at a microphone, her hands resting on the life growing inside her, her voice about to shatter the illusion of happily ever after. Her name was Simone Carter, and she had been summoned to this place not as a guest but as a spectacle, not to celebrate but to be destroyed. The woman who orchestrated this cruelty stood 15 feet away in a gown that cost more than Simone earned in 6 months. Her lips curved in anticipation of a humiliation she believed would cement her victory. But Vanessa Hartley had made a catastrophic miscalculation. She had confused silence with weakness, grace with defeat, and she was about to learn that some women carry thunder in their souls, and when they finally speak, the entire world trembles. What happened in the next 4 minutes would expose secrets that should have remained buried, would reveal character that had been hidden behind privilege, would teach everyone present a lesson about dignity that they would carry for the rest of their lives. But before we understand why Simone's song became a reckoning, we must go back to where this tragedy began, to the moment when love died, and vengeance was born. Simone Carter had loved deeply and foolishly, the way young women sometimes do when they believe that devotion can transform a man into something he was never meant to be. She met Michael Hartley 3 years earlier at a community fundraiser where she was volunteering, and he was attending to please his parents, old money Connecticut people who believed charity galas were where respectable families displayed their moral credentials. Simone was 24 then, working 2 jobs to finish her graduate degree in music education, pouring every spare moment into teaching underprivileged children the piano skills that had saved her own life when she was growing up in foster care. Michael was 28, heir to a pharmaceutical fortune, handsome in that effortless way privileged men often are, educated at schools where his family name mattered more than his grades. He approached her that evening with the kind of confidence that comes from never having been rejected, and Simone, exhausted from a double shift and vulnerable in ways she did not fully understand, found herself charmed by his attention. He seemed different from the foster brothers who had made her teenage years dangerous, different from the men in her neighborhood who saw young black women as conquest rather than companions. Michael spoke about classical music with genuine knowledge, asked about her work with real interest, and when he requested her number, she gave it believing that perhaps love could cross the chasms of race and class that divided their worlds. The relationship bloomed quickly, intensely, in that way that feels like destiny, but is often just chemistry mixed with wishful thinking. Michael showered her with her experiences she had never imagined. Dinners at restaurants where meals cost more than her weekly grocery budget, weekend trips to his family's summer home in Martha's Vineyard. But he kept their relationship carefully hidden from his social circle, explaining that his family was old-fashioned, that he needed time to prepare them, that their love was too special to expose to judgment prematurely. Simone accepted these explanations because she wanted to believe them, because the alternative was too painful to examine. She ignored the way he never posted photos of them together, the way he arranged their dates in neighborhoods where his friends would not see them, the way he tensed whenever they encountered someone he knew. She told herself that love required patience, that his discomfort was temporary, that eventually he would choose her over his family's expectations. She was wrong. The pregnancy was unplanned, but not unwelcome, at least not to Simone. When she saw the positive test, her first emotion was joy tinged with fear, the response of a woman who had grown up without family and desperately wanted to create what she had never had. She imagined Michael's reaction, rehearsed the conversation, pictured his face softening with wonder at the news of becoming a father. When she told him over dinner at her small apartment, cooking the meal he claimed to love, lighting candles to create intimacy. His face did not soften. He hardened into something cold and distant, a mask she had never seen before but would never forget. He asked if she was sure. She confirmed. He asked if she had considered alternatives. She recoiled. Then he spoke the words that killed whatever remained of her illusions. He told her that his family would never accept a black woman, let alone a black child. He told her that his parents had already selected someone appropriate for him to marry, a woman from their social class, a woman whose skin was the right shade. He told her that he could arrange for the pregnancy to be handled discreetly, that he would pay for everything, that she should understand this was not personal but practical. And when Simone refused, when she stood her ground and declared that she would raise this child with or without him, he left her apartment and her life with the casualness of someone discarding outgrown clothes. The months that followed were brutal in ways that went beyond the physical challenges of pregnancy. Michael blocked her calls, ignored her messages, disappeared so completely that Simone began to doubt whether he had ever really existed or if their entire relationship had been her imagination. She learned through social media, that modern torture device that allows us to witness the happiness we have been excluded from, that Michael had become engaged to Vanessa Hartley, no relation but convenient in name, a woman whose family fortune matched his own, whose blonde hair and blue eyes fit perfectly into the portrait his parents had always envisioned. Simone saw their engagement photos, professional shots taken in gardens where roses bloomed in shades of cream and pink, saw the comments celebrating their perfect match, saw no acknowledgement that Michael had left a pregnant woman behind like trash to be disposed of. The betrayal cut deeper than any knife, but Simone was determined to survive. She doubled down on her work, preparing for single motherhood with the fierce determination of someone who had survived worse, creating a life for her child that would be filled with love even if it lacked a father. Then the invitation arrived, and Simone understood that Michael's cruelty had not ended but merely been waiting for the perfect moment to strike again. The envelope was expensive, the kind of heavy cream cardstock that announced money and taste, addressed to Ms. Simone Carter in calligraphy that looked hand-drawn. Inside, the invitation to Michael Hartley and Vanessa Hartley's wedding, ceremony and reception at the Hartley estate, black tie required. But there was more. A separate card, also in elegant script, requesting that Miss Carter perform a musical selection during the cocktail hour. Noting that Michael had mentioned her extraordinary talent to his bride-to-be, suggesting that her participation would add such personal significance to their celebration. The card was signed by Vanessa, the handwriting looping and confident, and, reading between the carefully chosen words, Simone understood exactly what this was. This was not an invitation but a summons. This was not honor, but humiliation. Vanessa knew about the pregnancy, knew about the abandonment, and wanted to parade Simone in front of their wealthy guests as proof of her own victory, as a living demonstration that she had won the prize that Simone had lost. Simone's first instinct was to ignore the invitation, to deny them the satisfaction of her attendance. But as she sat in her small apartment with her hand on her swollen belly, feeling her daughter kick and turn, something inside her shifted. She thought about all the time she had been silent when she should have spoken, all the moments she had accepted indignity to keep the peace, all the years she had made herself small to make others comfortable. She thought about the child she was carrying, about the world this daughter would enter, about the lessons she wanted to teach about dignity and courage, and refusing to be erased. And she made a decision that would require every ounce of strength she possessed. She would accept the invitation. She would attend the wedding. She would stand at that microphone. But she would not sing the song they expected. She would not perform the role of the defeated ex-lover who had been replaced by someone better. She would sing truth, and that truth would burn. The 2 weeks before the wedding, Simone spent every spare moment preparing. She selected a song that most people knew, a jazz standard that seemed innocuous on the surface, but whose lyrics could cut like razors when sung with the right intention. She practiced her delivery until every word carried the weight she needed, every pause landed with precision, every note conveyed the story she needed to tell. She chose her outfit carefully, a deep blue dress that accommodated her pregnancy while maintaining elegance, refusing to appear diminished or desperate. She prepared herself mentally for what would come, for the stares and whispers, for the discomfort of standing in a room full of people who would see her as an embarrassment, for the challenge of maintaining composure while performing for an audience that wanted her to fail. She told herself that she was not doing this for revenge, though she would be lying if she claimed revenge was not part of her motivation. She was doing this for her daughter, to demonstrate that black women did not have to accept cruelty silently, that dignity was not determined by bank accounts or skin color, that truth had power even when spoken by those society had deemed powerless. The Hartley estate was exactly what Simone expected, a sprawling property with manicured lawns and a house that looked like it had been transplanted from an English manor, old money architecture designed to intimidate anyone who did not belong. She arrived deliberately late, timing her entrance for maximum impact, walking through the gates where security checked her name against a list with barely concealed surprise. The ceremony had already concluded, and cocktail hour was in full swing on the terrace overlooking gardens that probably required a full-time staff to maintain. Women in gowns that cost more than cars sipped champagne and picked at hors d'oeuvres prepared by chefs imported for the occasion. Men in tuxedos discussed business deals and golf handicaps with the easy confidence of those who had never worried about money. And there, in the center of it all, stood Michael and Vanessa, newly married, accepting congratulations with the gracious smiles of people who believed the universe revolved around their happiness. Simone's entrance caused exactly the disruption Vanessa had anticipated. Conversations paused mid-sentence. Heads turned. Eyes widened at the sight of a visibly pregnant black woman in a room full of white wealth. Simone could feel their judgment, their curiosity, their barely concealed disdain. She could sense them calculating who she was and why she was there, whispering theories that ranged from charitable +1 to entertainment hired for the evening. She walked through their stairs with her head high, one hand unconsciously protective on her belly, the other carrying the small purse that contained the lyrics she had written, though she had long since memorized every word. Michael saw her and his face went pale. Confusion, and then recognition, and then something that might have been fear, flickering across his features. Vanessa saw her and smiled, a smile that was all teeth and no warmth, the smile of a predator who had just spotted prey walking into a trap. Vanessa approached with her new husband in tow, her wedding gown a confection of silk and lace that probably cost more than Simone earned in a year, her veil removed to reveal hair styled to perfection, her makeup flawless, her entire appearance screaming victory. She greeted Simone with exaggerated warmth, the kind of false kindness that is actually contempt dressed in pleasantries. She thanked Simone for coming, for agreeing to perform, for being so gracious about celebrating their special day. She introduced Michael as though Simone were a stranger, making no acknowledgement of their history, treating her as mere entertainment hired for the occasion. Michael said nothing, his jaw tight, his eyes refusing to meet Simone's, his entire body radiating discomfort. Vanessa guided Simone toward the small stage area where a piano waited, explaining that she would perform after the toasts, that she should keep it brief, that they wanted something uplifting and romantic. And then, unable to resist twisting the knife deeper, Vanessa leaned in close, whispered words meant for Simone alone. She said that she hoped this would provide closure, That perhaps watching Michael marry someone appropriate would help Simone move on, that some women needed to learn their place in the world. The words were delivered with a smile, spoken quietly enough that no one else could hear, venomous and calculated and designed to break Simone's composure before she even began. But Simone did not break. She thanked Vanessa for the opportunity, her voice steady, her face betraying nothing of the rage building inside her. She walked to the piano and sat on the bench, adjusting her dress over her belly, arranging the microphone, taking her time while the guests gathered closer, drawn by curiosity about this unexpected performer. The best man had just finished his toast, something generic about love and friendship, and the crowd was relaxed from champagne, ready for light entertainment before dinner. They expected a nice song, something pretty and a forgettable background music to accompany their conversations. They had no idea they were about to witness something that would haunt them for years. Simone placed her hands on the piano keys, feeling the familiar smoothness beneath her fingers, drawing strength from the instrument that had been her companion through every difficult moment of her life. She looked out at the crowd, at the sea of white faces waiting to be charmed, or bored, or politely appreciative, at Michael standing frozen, with fear in his eyes, at Vanessa glowing with satisfaction at the humiliation she believed she was orchestrating. And Simone began to play the opening notes of a song everyone recognized, Billie Holiday's Strange Fruit, a song about lynching and, racism and the violence America pretended did not exist, a song that was beautiful and terrible and completely inappropriate for a wedding, a song that transformed the garden terrace into something else entirely. Her voice, when she began to sing, was not the voice Vanessa expected. It was not tentative or ashamed. It was powerful and clear and filled with centuries of pain, carrying the weight of every black woman who had been used and discarded, every child born into a world that did not want them, every moment of injustice that polite society preferred to ignore. She sang about strange fruit hanging from poplar trees, and everyone understood she was not singing about trees at all, but about the casual cruelty of people like those gathered here, people who consumed black labor and black bodies and black talent without ever acknowledging their humanity. The crowd began to shift uncomfortably, conversations dying, champagne glasses frozen halfway to lips, the pleasant buzz of the celebration evaporating into something darker and more real. But Simone was not finished. As the final haunting notes of Strange Fruit faded, she transitioned without pause into a song she had written herself, lyrics that laid bare the entire story of her relationship with Michael, of his promises and his abandonment, of the child growing inside her who would never know her father because he was too much of a coward to claim her. She sang about a man who hid his love in darkness, who was brave in private but cowardly in public, who chose inheritance over integrity. She sang about a woman who wore a white dress but had a black heart, who invited her husband's pregnant ex-girlfriend to their wedding, not out of magnanimity, but malice, who thought humiliation was something you could inflict without consequence. Her voice grew stronger with each verse, no longer singing to the crowd but singing through them, her words becoming a testimony, a confession, a reckoning. The garden had gone completely silent except for Simone's voice. Guests stood paralyzed, unable to look away, unable to process what they were witnessing. This was not supposed to happen at weddings. Weddings were celebrations, carefully choreographed performances of love and happiness, not stages for truth-telling and exposure. But truth does not wait for appropriate moments, and Simone had waited long enough. She sang about Michael's parents, naming them directly, describing their racism as casually as one might describe the weather, pointing out that they stood 10 feet away sipping champagne and had not even acknowledged the grandchild growing in her belly, because that grandchild's skin would be too dark for their family portrait. She sang about Vanessa's complicity about how securing a rich husband apparently required crushing other women, about how white privilege meant never having to consider the humanity of those you stepped on while climbing. Michael tried to intervene, moving toward the piano with his hands raised, his face red with anger and embarrassment. But Simone's voice rose to match his approach, and several guests actually moved to block his path, transfixed by what was unfolding, sensing that they were witnessing something important, even if it made them profoundly uncomfortable. Vanessa stood rooted to her spot, her perfect smile finally cracking, tears of rage and humiliation streaming down her face, her wedding day transforming from triumph to disaster. Her attempt to humiliate Simone boomeranging back with devastating force. Some guests began to leave, unable to tolerate the discomfort, but most remained, held by the terrible beauty of Simone's performance, by the recognition that they were witnessing someone reclaiming dignity through the only power she possessed, the power of her voice and her truth. When Simone reached the final verse of her song, she stood from the piano bench, her hands cradling her belly, her voice softening into something that was no longer anger but sorrow, singing about the daughter she would raise alone, about teaching that child to be strong in a world that would try to break her, about hoping that one day people would see black women as fully human rather than as objects to be used or obstacles to be removed. She sang about forgiveness being possible but requiring acknowledgement, about accountability being the price of redemption, about how you cannot build happiness on someone else's destruction without that foundation eventually crumbling. And then she stopped, letting the silence fill the space where her voice had been, letting the guests sit with their discomfort, letting Michael and Vanessa face the consequences of their cruelty. The response was complex and immediate. Some guests began to applaud, slowly at first, and then with growing intensity, moved by Simone's courage and power, recognizing that they had witnessed artistry even as it made them accomplices to someone's pain. Others stood in stunned silence, uncertain how to react, their social training having provided no script for this situation. Michael's mother, a woman whose face suggested decades of Botox and bitterness, pushed through the crowd toward Simone with fury written across her features, ready to eject this person who had dared to disrupt their perfect day with uncomfortable truths. But before she reached the stage, Michael's father, a man who had built his pharmaceutical fortune on the backs of workers he never acknowledged, put a hand on his wife's arm and said something that stopped her cold. Then something extraordinary happened, something no one expected, least of all Simone. Michael walked toward her, not with anger, but with something that looked like devastation, his face stripped of all pretense, and he stood before her while the entire wedding party watched. He tried to speak several times, words failing him, and finally he did what he should have done months ago. He apologized. Not the casual sorry that people offer when they want discomfort to end, but a real apology that acknowledged specific harms, that named his cowardice and cruelty, that recognized how his choices had nearly destroyed someone he claimed to have loved. He acknowledged the baby, placing his hand tentatively on Simone's belly, with tears running down his face, feeling his daughter move beneath his palm. And he promised in front of everyone that he would take responsibility, that his child would know her father and carry his name, that he would provide support, not as charity but as obligation. Vanessa, watching her groom apologize to his pregnant ex-girlfriend at their wedding reception, made a decision that surprised everyone, including herself. She could have raged, could have demanded Michael choose between his new wife and his old responsibilities, could have turned this moment into an even uglier confrontation. Instead, she removed her ring, placed it in Michael's hand, and walked away from her own wedding with a dignity that Simone had to respect. Whatever Vanessa's flaws, and they were many, she was not willing to build her marriage on a foundation of abandonment and lies. The engagement had been based on assumptions about Michael that were now revealed as false. She would not compete with reality. The wedding dissolved after that, guests departing in clusters, some approaching Simone to offer support, others avoiding eye contact as they fled the scene of their discomfort. Michael's parents stood in heated conversation with their son, their plans for his perfect life unraveling in real time. Several women, some who had treated Simone with disdain earlier, approached to share their own stories of being used and discarded by powerful men, of having to choose between dignity and survival, of understanding exactly what courage it took to do what she had just done. By the time Simone left the estate, she was not alone. She was surrounded by a group of women who had witnessed her transformation from victim to victor, who insisted on exchanging contact information, who promised support as she prepared for single motherhood. The aftermath unfolded over the following months in ways that surprised everyone. Michael, confronted with the consequences of his actions in such a public way, actually followed through on his promises. He established child support that was generous, not exploitative. He attended prenatal appointments. He began the work of earning forgiveness he might never fully receive. His relationship with his parents fractured, creating distance that allowed him to become someone better than they had raised him to be. Vanessa, freed from a marriage that would have been built on sand, channeled her intelligence and resources into causes that actually helped people rather than just making her feel charitable. She and Simone would never be friends. The wounds were too deep for that, but they developed a mutual respect based on recognizing each other's strength. Simone's daughter was born in autumn, a healthy girl with her mother's eyes and her father's stubborn chin, and Simone named her Billy, after the woman whose song had helped her find her voice when it mattered most. Michael was present at the birth, holding Simone's hand through contractions, meeting his daughter with tears and promises, beginning the long process of becoming the father this child deserved. The video of Simone's wedding performance, filmed by several guests and posted online without her permission, went viral, sparking conversations about race and class, and the ways we treat pregnant women and the double standards that allow men to abandon their children without social consequences. Simone received offers to perform professionally, opportunities to share her story on larger stages, invitations to speak at events about dignity and courage, and using your voice when systems try to silence you. But the most important change was internal. Simone discovered something about herself that day on the terrace, something she had not fully understood before. She learned that dignity cannot be taken from you, only surrendered, and that she would never surrender hers again. She learned that speaking truth is terrifying and necessary, and sometimes the only option when silence becomes complicity in your own erasure. She learned that the weapons used to humiliate her could be transformed into instruments of liberation, that a song meant to mock her could become a song that freed her, that cruelty often backfires on those who wield it without understanding the strength of those they target. She learned that other women were watching, waiting to see if anyone would stand up, and that her courage had given them permission to find their own. This story teaches us something fundamental about human nature and the hierarchies we create to organize our world. It teaches us that wealth and whiteness do not grant anyone the one right to treat others as disposable, that pregnancy does not make women vulnerable targets, but fierce protectors of the lives they carry, that silence in the face of injustice is not politeness but cowardice. It teaches us that the tables can turn in an instant when truth is spoken with conviction, that public humiliation as a tactic often destroys the person who attempts it more than the intended victim, that accountability is the only path to genuine redemption. It teaches us that Black women have been singing truth into spaces that did not want to hear it for centuries, and that their songs have changed the world, even when the world resisted that change. It teaches us that every person possesses power that cannot be measured in bank accounts or social status, the power of their voice and their story and their refusal to be erased. The wedding that was meant to celebrate Michael and Vanessa's love became instead a testament to Simone's strength. The song that was meant to humiliate her became the song that liberated her. The moment that was designed to prove her insignificance became the moment that proved everyone else's cruelty. And a daughter was born into a world that had tried to deny her existence, carried by a mother who had found her voice precisely when it mattered most, supported by a father who had learned the hard way that running from responsibility only leads you back to yourself. If this story has touched something deep within you, if you have felt the injustice of Simone's situation or the triumph of her response, if you recognize that these stories matter because they reveal truths about our world that we would rather not acknowledge, then do not let this moment pass without action. Share this story with someone who needs to hear it, someone who has been silenced or diminished or treated as though their pain does not matter. Like this video to ensure that stories like Simone's reach the audiences who need them most. Subscribe to this channel because we will continue telling these stories that center dignity and justice and the power of speaking truth even when your voice shakes. Leave a comment sharing your own experience or reflection, because these stories are not complete until they become conversations, until they inspire us to see our own lives and choices more clearly. And remember, as you move through your own life and encounter people who seem powerless or invisible, that every person carries a song inside them, and some of those songs have the power to bring down empires. Never underestimate the strength of those you think you have defeated. Never assume that silence means acceptance. Never forget that cruelty always costs more than the person who pays it realizes, and that dignity is the one thing that wealth cannot buy and poverty cannot remove. Because every story hides a truth, and every truth deserves to be heard.